Welcome to this last module in this course on strategic leadership, where we're going to be focusing on leading change. This is module 6 of 6. So far, we started by talking about the importance of developing our vision and purpose and clarifying that clearly. We moved on from vision and purpose to strategic thinking and how to really think about end outcomes and putting together strategic approaches to achieve those end outcomes. We moved on from there to talk about decision making and how to be a rational decision maker who can also include others and getting input before making big decisions. Our fourth module was focused on setting priorities and goals and really knowing how do we determine which things are the most important to focus on in order to achieve our goals. We just recently talked about delegation and how to know which tasks and activities are best to give to whom. And now we're on this final module of how to lead change as a strategic leader. Now, when you think about leading and being a strategic leader, obviously we started with a vision, right? What is the end vision and purpose we have in mind? And with that in mind, it implies that the vision we have for the future is different from what we're living in today. The future we're envisioning is different from what we're living in today, which means change has to happen. We want to influence change, right? We want to influence people towards a vision, and that requires change. It probably means change for our target audience, whoever we're trying to do ministry for, and it also will require change for us as leaders and for our ministry team. Because if we as leaders and as a ministry team continue to do the same things today that we've always done and do them in the same ways, we will most likely continue to get the same sort of result. But in order to achieve a future vision, we want to see different and better results, which means we have to continuously change what we're doing. So leading change is what is required to accomplish a vision. And that's why it's a critical skill in being a strategic leader, knowing the skills of how to lead change. And I'll first start with the objectives of this module. 3 simple objectives for this module on leading change. First is to basically understand what your role is in leading change as a strategic leader. Secondly is understanding what the positive and negative responses are that we commonly see to change in people, because people generally either respond in a positive or a negative way to change. And it's good if we have an understanding of what those types of responses might look like and how to respond and how to plan for them. Thirdly, the third objective is how to apply some of these principles of change management to your actual ministry plans so that you can successfully lead change with your ministry. So let's start with a poll. This is going to sound perhaps like a bit of a strange question to start with on leading change for Christians, but the question is, what percentage of new businesses do you think fail? So you may not be a business person, and that's okay, but what percentage of new businesses do you think fail? Is it A, 20% of all new businesses fail in the first year? Or B, 33% of all businesses fail within 2 years? Or C, 50% of all new businesses fail within 5 years? Or D, 70% of all new businesses fail within 10 years? What do you think the real percentage is? Now, this is based on information that we get from the United States Bureau of Labor that collects a lot of statistics on this. So it's United States data, but I think we can assume that the data is probably pretty similar worldwide. And according to the US Bureau of Labor, all 4 of these answers are correct. 1 in 5 new businesses fail in the very first year they are operating. And 1/3 of all new businesses fail within 2 years. Half of all new businesses fail within 5 years, and 70% of all new businesses fail within 10 years. Kind of a sad, sobering statistic, right? Now, how does this relate to Christians doing Christian work around the world? Well, when you think about it, we're trying to start ministries and run ministries all over the world, usually in countries that are not our own country. We leave our home country, go somewhere else, and try to start a new ministry, a new work. If we know the statistics here of starting something new in, let's say, our home country, if we're American, if an American starting a company in America has this much difficulty starting a new business there, how much more difficult would it be for them to start a new business in a different country where it's a different language, a different culture, right? And different laws. how much more difficult will it be to start a new business in a different country other than your own? The same is true for Christian workers trying to go somewhere else in the world and start something new. It's kind of like a business, it's a ministry though, but they're trying to start something new. It's even more difficult trying to start something new in a different country than in your own. So these statistics probably give us an indication of how difficult it is to start a ministry in another country. And in reality, it's probably much harder than this. So it's kind of helpful to know then, well, what are the reasons behind these failures? Why do new businesses fail? Because probably a lot of those same reasons relate to why new ministries fail. Well, some of the data in America, again, if we look specifically at change projects, businesses, large businesses in America are constantly changing and trying to keep up with a changing world and be competitive. And they're constantly upgrading their technology and their software. For over 20 years now, companies have been constantly upgrading their software to keep up with the changing technological world. And if they don't, they can't survive. So it's interesting to look at IT projects, technology projects, and how often do they fail? How well do they do in achieving their goals? And then we can think of a goal as a change objective, because anytime we're trying to achieve something as a goal, it means something had to have changed. We're trying to change something. And the statistics say that 68% of all technology projects fail to produce their intended results. 45% of them run over budget, and 56% of them provide less value or change than they originally expected. And the reasons behind it, the biggest barriers for success, are actually very interesting. 58% of the reason that these projects aren't successful, biggest barrier to success is that they can't change the mindsets and attitudes of the people in their organization, because making change requires your people, your staff, your employees to think differently and to operate differently. But if you can't help them to change their mindset and attitude, they're not going to successfully make the change that you're wanting. 58% of the time, that's the biggest issue. Almost half the time, it's a corporate culture issue where the change we're trying to make is just in some sort of conflict with our corporate culture, and it's making it difficult to make the change. And almost a third of the time, it's the senior management lack of their support, lack of senior management support, that is contributing to this project, this change project, failing. And that equates to us as strategic leaders, as leaders. We need to lead and support a change initiative. And we can see already that a third of the time, it's clearly the senior leader's fault, if you can say that. And I would even argue that if 58% of the time changing mindsets and attitudes was the biggest barrier, well, we as senior leaders need to have a huge impact on helping to change those mindsets and attitudes. So leading change is a difficult process, and it's extremely important for us to know how we can, as leaders, lead our organizations forward through the change. And just to link this again to Christian work around the world, here's a statistic on missionary attrition. Approximately 7,000 missionaries quit every year, leave the mission field every year. That's somewhere around one person every 15 minutes is leaving the mission field. And sadly, 50 to 70% of those people are leaving for what we call preventable reasons, meaning it wasn't their time to leave. They aren't someone who should have been taken off the field. 50 to 70% of the time, these are people we want on the field, but for a preventable reason, they left. And usually it has to do with receiving the type of help and encouragement and support that they need to be successful on the field. What's the top reason that missionaries leave the field? It's actually, strangely, conflict with their own peers, with fellow missionaries. But the point here is that missionaries are going through changes as they're on the mission field. They're trying to have an impact, and it requires change from them that our organizations and us as leaders of organizations need to be helping our missionaries to work through the changes they're going through in order to keep them on the field. So it's another reason why, as you are running a ministry, we need to realize that our people are important, and we need to know what we can do to help them be successful and help them to make whatever changes they need to be making to be successful and effective on the mission field.